Perhaps in every person's life, there is at least one person who makes us feel tired, not because they are strangers, but sometimes they are actually someone very close. There are people who always find a way to criticize you. No matter how hard you try, they still feel it is not enough. There are people who seem to appear only when they need something from you. Your kindness slowly becomes something they simply expect. And there are also people who, after just a few minutes of talking with them, leave you feeling as if your energy has been drained. You know that feeling. That feeling when you hear someone mention their name, and suddenly your heart feels a little heavier. You don't completely hate them, but being around them always makes you tense. Maybe it is a co-worker, an old friend, someone in your family, or sometimes it is someone you once trusted very deeply. We often think that if we live better, if we become more patient, then maybe the people around us will also become easier to deal with. But the reality of life is different. There are some people who seem to carry their own bitterness into every place they enter. And then the question that many of us have quietly asked ourselves is this: what are we supposed to do with people like that? Should we avoid them completely? Should we treat them the same way they treat us? Or simply endure and stay silent? If Jesus were living in today's world, in the middle of our complicated relationships, what would he say about the people who make our lives difficult? How would he teach us to treat them? Many people think that living according to the teachings of Jesus means staying close only to good people, people who are pleasant, people who make us feel comfortable. But if we look at what is recorded in the Bible, we will see that the life of Jesus was not like that at all. He did not choose a circle filled only with agreeable people to live among. On the contrary, much of his time was spent among people who were complicated, full of contradictions, and often difficult in their personalities, very much like the world we are living in today. The Pharisees are a clear example. They were always watching Jesus, always looking for faults in his words and actions. If even a small detail did not match the way they understood the law, they immediately criticized him. The atmosphere between them and Jesus was often tense. Yet Jesus did not avoid them. He still spoke with them, still answered them, and many times spoke directly about the errors in their thinking. There were also people whom society at that time despised. Tax collectors were seen as greedy and as traitors to their own people. Many even avoided them as if they were something unclean. But Jesus sat and ate with them. This made many people around him uncomfortable. They could not understand why he would choose to be close to those whom everyone else wanted to stay away from. Even within the group of people who followed Jesus, not everyone was easy to deal with. Peter was impulsive, often speaking before he had time to think. At times he boldly declared his loyalty, yet at other times he was afraid and denied his own teacher. Very human reactions that can be seen in almost anyone. And then there was Judas, a man who stayed very close to Jesus and walked with him for many years. Yet in the end, he was the one who betrayed him. This shows that even in the closest relationships, the complexity of human nature is always present. Not everyone who is close to us will always remain loyal or easy to understand. When we look at all of this, we begin to see a very clear truth. Jesus did not live in a perfect environment. Around him were people who criticized him, people who doubted him, people who were hot-tempered, people who were weak, and even people who could hurt him. This feels very close to our lives today. At work, In our families and in our social relationships, there are always people who carry their own personalities with them. Some are quick to judge. Some get angry easily. Some struggle to trust others. Things are not always simple or comfortable. Some people hope that if they live better lives, the environment around them will become gentler as well. But reality does not always work that way. You may try to live kindly and still meet people who misunderstand you, doubt you, or simply do not like you for very small reasons. Jesus understood this very well. He was not surprised by the complexity of human nature. He saw the weakness, the contradictions, and the difficult reactions inside each person. And he knew that no one is completely simple or completely easy to deal with. One important thing to notice is that Jesus did not build his life by avoiding every difficult person. He did not say that we should stay only with those who make us feel comfortable. Instead, he stepped directly into those complicated relationships. In many stories, we see Jesus sitting at the table with people who were looked down on by society. Others looked at this and felt uncomfortable. But for Jesus, a person was always more complex than the label society placed on them. This also reminds us of something very practical. The world is not simply divided into two groups, good people and bad people. Most of us live somewhere in between. Sometimes we are pleasant, and sometimes we are the ones who make others feel tired. Sometimes we understand others, and sometimes we react too quickly. Jesus lived right in the middle of all of this, not in a peaceful environment without conflict. He heard criticism, faced suspicion, and many times had to deal with very human reactions from the people around him. That is why the teachings of Jesus about how to treat others are not theories far removed from real life. They were formed in the middle of relationships filled with tension, misunderstanding, and differences. And when we look at his life, one thing becomes very clear. Jesus did not live in a world filled only with pleasant people. He lived among people full of contradictions, very much like us, and very much like the people we meet every day. The natural reaction of a person when treated unpleasantly is usually very simple. Someone says something that hurts you, and anger immediately rises inside. Without much thought, the urge to respond appears. It is something very normal, and almost everyone has experienced it. Many people go even further than that first feeling of anger. When someone repeatedly makes us uncomfortable, the respect we once had for them slowly disappears. In our minds, thoughts of looking down on them begin to appear, judging them or attaching negative labels to them. That feeling makes us think we are standing on the right side. Not a few times, people also want to retaliate in more subtle ways. It does not necessarily mean causing direct harm, but at least wanting the other person to feel what they have caused us to feel. A cold sentence, a distant attitude, or a reaction that makes them uncomfortable in return. These reactions are very familiar. In fact, society often sees them as a normal way of defending oneself. If someone hurts you, keeping distance or reacting strongly is often viewed as a way to protect yourself. But in the teachings of Jesus, we see a different direction of thinking. He once said something that many people find difficult to accept. Love your enemies. Love even those who stand against you. Love even those who do not treat you well. At first hearing, this can sound unrealistic. Many people immediately assume that it means accepting every kind of bad treatment. But if we look more carefully, the meaning of this teaching is not about allowing others to continue hurting us. What Jesus was pointing to lies somewhere else inside our own hearts. When someone constantly makes you angry, the most dangerous thing is not their actions. The real danger is what begins to happen inside you. The first feeling of anger may be small, but if it is held onto for too long, it slowly turns into bitterness. And that bitterness begins to change the way you see the people around you. A person who was once very calm may become more easily irritated. A person who once trusted others may begin to doubt everyone. Because of a few negative experiences, the heart slowly becomes harder. Jesus understood this very well. When he spoke about loving your enemies, what he wanted to protect was not the feelings of those who caused the hurt. What he wanted to protect was your heart. Love, in that context, does not mean continuing to let others take advantage of you. It does not mean you must always stay close to people who drain your strength. Its deeper meaning is not allowing your heart to become like the thing that hurt you. A bitter person often thinks they are keeping distance from the one who hurt them, but the reality is different. That person is still tied to the memories and emotions connected to that individual. Many years later, just hearing that person's name can bring the old feelings back. This shows a very clear truth. That person may have left your life a long time ago, but they are still living inside your mind. That is why bitterness is like a kind of invisible prison. You think you are holding on to it to remember what happened, but the longer you hold it, the more it holds you. When you keep bitterness for too long, the one who is truly imprisoned is not the person who hurt you. They may have continued with their life long ago. The one who remains trapped in those emotions is you. The teaching of Jesus leads people out of this cycle, not by denying the pain, but by refusing to let the pain become a permanent part of the heart. That is the only way to keep the soul from being shaped by what others have done. Many people, when they hear the teachings of Jesus about love and forgiveness, immediately think that following him means having to endure everyone. Whoever makes you uncomfortable, you must be patient. Whoever treats you badly, you must continue to stay. That understanding may sound very moral, but if we look closely at the life of Jesus, we will see that the story is much more realistic. When we read the Bible, we realize that Jesus was not someone who always tried to please everyone. There were moments when he spoke very directly, and many people did not like it. There were also times when he did not explain further, even when others were misunderstanding him. This shows that he was not trying to preserve every relationship at any cost. One detail that is often overlooked is that Jesus left places many times when people did not want to listen to him. When a community closed its heart, he did not try to force them to change. He simply walked away and continued his path somewhere else. This reveals a very clear truth. Love does not mean staying in every situation. Sometimes wisdom lies in recognizing when a conversation is no longer bringing anything good. Many people have experienced the feeling of trying to explain themselves to someone who does not want to understand. You say one thing, and they immediately twist it into something else. You try to stay calm, but the conversation keeps circling in tension. After a while, you realize your energy is being drained. Jesus also faced situations like that. Some people did not come to seek the truth, but only to argue. They asked questions not to listen to the answers, but to find ways to challenge him. In moments like that, Jesus did not always continue the debate. There were times when he simply remained silent. That silence was not weakness, but an understanding that not every argument is worth joining. Some conversations only make things worse the longer they continue. In everyday life, Many people feel pressure to explain themselves to everyone. They fear that if they do not clear up every misunderstanding, others will think wrongly about them. But the more they try to explain, the more they become trapped in endless arguments. The stories in the Bible show that Jesus did not live that way. He said what needed to be said, but he also knew when to stop. Not everyone is ready to listen, and continuing to speak does not always lead to a good result. This connects directly to the idea of boundaries in relationships. Boundaries are not coldness. They simply mean understanding your own limits and recognizing what is harming your soul. A person can love others and still keep distance when it is necessary. Those two things do not contradict each other. In fact, sometimes distance is the only way to keep love from turning into exhaustion. Many people remain in relationships that drain them simply because they think leaving would be selfish. But when we look at the way Jesus lived, we see that he did not place himself inside endless cycles with no way out. There were places where he stayed only for a time and then moved on, not because he hated the people there, but because his path did not stop at endless arguments. This is also true in modern life. There are conversations where no matter how much you try, the other person still does not want to understand. There are relationships where every interaction leaves you feeling heavier. In moments like that, stepping back is not failure. Sometimes it is a sign of maturity. You begin to realize that not every battle needs to be fought. When we look at the life of Jesus, one thing becomes very clear. He loved people, but he did not allow himself to be pulled into every conflict. His love did not mean staying in every situation. Jesus loved people, but he also knew when to walk away. Feeling uncomfortable with someone does not always come only from their behavior. Sometimes our strong reaction says more about ourselves than about the other person. Something they say might seem completely normal to others, yet it touches a sensitive place within us. You may have experienced this before. Someone speaks with a slightly arrogant tone, and you immediately feel irritated. Meanwhile, the person next to you does not seem to react that strongly. That does not mean you are wrong, but it shows that each person has different points that are easily triggered. These reactions are often connected to deeper things inside the heart. Someone who was looked down on in the past may become very sensitive to the arrogance of others. Just a small attitude can be enough to make them feel threatened or insulted. The same thing happens with many other personalities. When facing a selfish person, some people may feel a little uncomfortable and then move on. But for someone who has been taken advantage of many times, that selfishness can provoke a very strong reaction. In moments like these, the person in front of us becomes an unintended mirror. They do not only reveal their own personality, but also reflect the weaknesses that exist inside us. Not everyone likes to look into that mirror. The natural reaction is to focus completely on the faults of the other person. That is much easier than asking ourselves why we reacted so strongly. But if we observe calmly, we will notice something quite interesting. The people who irritate us the most often touch the places within us that have not yet been healed. Someone who constantly boasts may annoy us because we once felt that we were not good enough. A cold person may make us uncomfortable because we once longed for care that we never received. These reactions do not make the other person's behavior right, but they give us an opportunity to look deeper into ourselves. Instead of only seeing that the other person is wrong, we begin to see the parts within us that have not yet matured. Many people grow a great deal after realizing this. They begin to ask different questions, not only, why is that person so difficult, but also, Why does that affect me so strongly? That question is not easy to answer. It requires honesty with ourselves. But when we dare to face it, we often discover things we had never recognized before. From the perspective of faith, many people believe that not every encounter in life is random. Sometimes, difficult people appear at just the right moment to reveal something that we need to change. Not to make us suffer, but to help us see ourselves more clearly. The personalities that trigger the strongest reactions in us are often the very things we need to learn to face and grow beyond. Jesus spoke many times about examining ourselves before judging others. That does not mean ignoring the mistakes of others, but recognizing that every person carries their own weaknesses. When we begin to see things this way, our attitude toward difficult people also changes a little. We can still keep distance when necessary, but inside there is no longer only irritation. Sometimes, the people who make us the most uncomfortable are the very ones who help us understand ourselves more clearly, and in a certain way, they become the mirror that reflects what we need to learn in order to grow. Life rarely gives us the power to choose every person who will appear along our journey. Some people arrive gently and make everything feel a little lighter. But there are also people who can make the atmosphere heavy with just a few words or a certain attitude. That is a very real part of life that almost everyone has experienced. Many people spend a great deal of time trying to change others. They hope that if they explain long enough, if they are patient enough, if they try just a little harder, the other person will understand. But the more they try, the more they realize a simple truth. Not everyone wants to change. At some point, a person begins to understand that they cannot control how others think or act. Each person carries their own personality, their own history, and their own wounds. All of these things influence the way they treat the people around them. The only thing truly in our hands is not the attitude of others. The only thing we can choose is how our own hearts respond to those things. That choice may seem small, but it shapes a great deal of the peace inside us. Someone may make you uncomfortable in a single moment, but how long that feeling stays inside you is a different story. Some people carry that irritation for a day, a month, even many years. As time passes, emotions that are never resolved slowly become a burden. Not because that person is still there every day, but because the memory of them still occupies a space in the mind. This happens to many people without them realizing it. Sometimes, when we look back many years later, we notice something surprising. The people who irritated us the most in the past were often the ones who changed us the most. Not because they intentionally tried to teach us, but because the situation forced us to grow. Difficult conversations can teach us how to remain calm. Misunderstandings can teach us how to listen more carefully. Tense relationships sometimes teach us how to set clearer boundaries. Patience is rarely learned in comfortable relationships. When everything is easy, we do not need to try very hard. But when we are around people who exhaust us, we begin to understand our own limits. Compassion often grows in a similar way. When we begin to see the weakness or the pain in others, we slowly realize that behind many difficult attitudes, there are stories we do not know. Not everyone changes. Not every relationship becomes better, but that does not mean every experience is meaningless. Even difficult encounters can leave behind a certain lesson. Many people only realize this when they look back at the path they have already walked. The people who once irritated them the most sometimes become the ones who help them understand themselves more clearly. Through those situations, we begin to see how we react, what easily triggers us, and where we still need to grow. These things are not always easy to accept, but they are very real. When we begin to see life this way, we no longer look at difficult people only as obstacles. They may still exhaust us, but we understand that their presence is not completely meaningless. You may not be able to choose the people who appear in your life, but you can always choose how your heart responds to them. And sometimes, the people who irritate us the most are the ones who teach us the most about patience, compassion, and about ourselves.